What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And as always, I'd like to say 2,000 shows over 10 years. We keep on going. And this is the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations. Also know I'm a certified empowerment coach and president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. And I am very honored and blessed to have two of my mentors on the line talking about probably one of the most spoken about issues in this year coming to the fray. So first of all, I have Glenn Barker, head of the Mankind Project in Chicago, awesome mentor, great thought process, healer, encourager, and shining the light on men and those who love them. Glenn, so good to have you back. How you been? What you been up to?
Well, thank you so much for. It's a homecoming here for me on the Dr. Vibe show, especially with Dr. Thompson. We have a Wayback Machine between us. And
yes.
And I have nothing but fond memories of much great work and great broadcasts. So thank you for having me back. Wonderfully busy in mission. I could not ask for a more dedicated and focused life, especially this time of my life. And so I'm here with a lot of gratitude and getting weary as a bit of an older man, to be quite frank. And yet, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and that's for sure. So I'm glad to be with you.
Excellent. And also from Louisiana, where it's probably a little bit warmer than it is where Glenn's located. And no? Oh my gosh. Okay. Assumptions. Dr. Marvin Thompson. I'll let him say a little about himself and the weather down in Louisiana.
Hey, it is Dr. Vibe. I might echo the sentiments of Glenn. It is always good to be back with you on your platform. And we had snow in New Orleans last weekend. Yes. And Glenn, I was in Chicago. I won't complain. I'll take this cold in Louisiana any day over Chicago cold. It's no comparison. But it is cooler here than usual. But we'll be back to normal Bohemian weather by next Tuesday.
Excellent.
I'm not going to complain that much.
Okay. All right. Well, this is good. Well, so a little background on our conversation this evening. For those who don't know, I was blessed to join these gentlemen in a number of Epic Conversations about 2 years ago. We did almost a year's worth of conversations on various aspects of manhood and masculinity, and I still get people asking about them, and when people want to know about manhood, I just give them these 4 conversations. And I reached out to Glenn a few weeks ago because I said, Glenn, you hadn't been on for a while, and Dr. T hadn't been on for a while. I said, can you come on, and what would you like to talk about? So I'm not going to say what Glenn wants to talk about. I'm just going to let him drive the ship. So Glenn, as my practice always, let's drive the ship.
All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on this program. Tonight is something that's been quite prevalent in the news and is, well, maybe we'll call it a new meme that is very much stuck, and that's the topic of toxic masculinity. And so I'd like to explore that with everybody tonight, see your versions of what you call toxic. Is it really toxic, or is it really something else? I'd like to go through all those corridors, talking about some of the things that happen in our world, and try to make some distinctions to maybe bring some clarity, or maybe just some great thoughts and conversation around this whole idea of toxic masculinity.
And just a precursor too, for those who do not know, we're broadcasting live on December 13th, and I brought to Glenn and Dr. T's attention before we went live that another Hollywood person now has been removed from their platform, Tavis Smiley, because of alleged sexual aggression. So it keeps on piling up. So Glenn, I know that you'll be able to approach this in a great way. So start it off and let's go along for the ride, please.
Very good. So I view that masculinity, anybody that has followed any of our work or any of our programs, I look at masculinity through a lens of archetypes. So I believe that there are shadow behaviors. In other words, all the things that men do can be in a generative sense or in the best sense of certain aspects, or there could be a shadowy subversive, more destructive expression of any part of a man, and there can be, of course, the absence of that expression, which leaves him devoid of the power to do something. So I'd like to see this conversation because, well, I'll slow down to say this. I think toxic masculinity has a place in conversation, but I believe it's, for me, it is too broad and too general and too connected to masculinity itself for me to be a healthy, to promote a healthy dialogue. It's a little too broad of a term. I think it's too closely connected to masculinity en masse, and it paints an overall picture of masculinity itself. If you turn it around, masculinity being toxic is almost the inference it comes to me dangerously close to. And so I'd like to make more of those distinctions as we go along. And I'd like to hear from you, men. What's your take on this whole toxic masculinity in a general sense? And where would you like to take tonight's conversation? Dr. Thompson, what have you observed? What would you like to bring to the discussion?
I'm like everybody else. It's like it's a wave, right? There's a pendulum swinging in one direction. And as we go through these social changes, I think some of what we're seeing is an unmasking of what's always been there. I think the surprise is that so many people are feeling comfortable. There's something in this pendulum swing that's giving people the confidence to be able to bring it forward. That, to me, is what I'm observing. As I've watched the names and heads roll, I have to be frank, I'm not surprised. Not about the individuals. Many of them I didn't even know or cared much to know. But I'm not surprised in the fact that the culture of norms in many of our organizations and subcultures within them are driven by masculine dominance. And it's not just masculine dominance and attitude. It doesn't surprise me that this sexual deviant behavior would be associated with it. So in that regard, I'm not surprised. I am, however, waiting for a saturation point. And that's the concern that I have about not only validating the events that we're seeing happen, but also tackling this topic in a way that creates a positive change, where men begin to own what they're observing. Even those who aren't caught, they go, oh, wait a minute. Let me take a second look at myself. And even if it's initially out of fear, it does cause pause. And I'm just a little concerned that if there isn't a balance, not in them, not saying to people to stop doing it, but a balance in how we are responding to what we find as this masculinity, I think we'll reach a saturation point. That's my concern. Glenn, Dr. Vi, we've all been around enough to see these things happen and people get whipped around them and it becomes, hey, this is the new thing, and it burns itself out. And then no real change ever takes place. And this is why this conversation to me is so important, because those who are paying attention will begin to have at least some tools and ways to parse out what they're hearing.
What a wonderful way to put this. And Dr. Vi, why don't you chime in on this yourself? I think Dr. Thompson's got a great point here that says, and you will see a lot of people go under the bus, some deservedly, maybe some not. And that's all part, if I may have liberty to paraphrase there, Dr. T, that we're going to see that. When these waves come, sometimes it takes innocent with it. And there is a whole thing about being guilty now, but then you're guilty before proven innocent, you know. But what's been your take, Dr. Vibe? How would you characterize our time, what's going on in our society? And I think Dr. T put it well, and where's the pendulum in your world around this?
Well, we could spend 4 or 5 hours on this. There's so many different aspects. I think one aspect of this is look at the people that are leaving, but look at the people who are alleged but are still there. And I think also another aspect is, isn't it interesting that this started to increase when after a certain individual of high office was accused of these transgressions. And ever since that time, that it's become in the media, and then you have the whole Me Too movement. So we have to take a look at how much social media is playing an impact on this. I do get a little bit concerned, and I'm not saying people are in the justice system. You are innocent until proven guilty. I just don't want it that some people are guilty that are innocent. I'm not defending. But I'm also concerned I'm not hearing too many men talk about this. The men on the ground level. We're seeing the men in the high places being taken down, but I'm not hearing enough conversation from men on the ground level talking about this, because I think that we as a men have to sit down and talk about this situation, and if it's wrong, we have to call them out. But I'm not hearing it at the ground level. We're seeing, as usual, the people in the high places, and we can list a number of names. They've been asked to leave. And who knows if they are guilty? That's a whole other thing. That's a whole other conversation. My concern is that what is it doing inside the men right now? Why aren't we having discussions about, more discussions like this about this situation? That's my biggest concern in regards, and also for the ladies that have been violated, I'm concerned about them also. But also I'm equally concerned about why is it just the media that's talking about this? Why aren't we having more conversations on the ground level about this subject, and how we can, if it's wrong, call it out, and how can it be remedied going forward, and the effects on our future boys, our future millennials. There is a collateral effect going forward. Are we going to see less relationships because of this? Are we going to see even less marriages because of this? There's so much collateral damage, more than just people having to step back. So I could go on, but I'll just leave it there.
I like the question you have, and I put this to all of us here. Dr. Thompson, how come more men, and we know this over time on a lot of subjects, how come more men aren't as visible as, just say, the women are when it comes with stating their positions, their grievances, or even in defense of themselves? What do you make up about that?
Well, I think that's one of the toxic components. You know, when we talk about this concept of toxic masculinity, I always try to, and Glenn, both of you see me do this before, I break things down from my own understanding. And I first take the word toxic. What does toxic mean? Toxic means it's poisonous to a particular condition or state, right? It's damaging to whatever state that you're in. Well, when we attach it to masculinity, what is masculinity? So we first define that. And this is where we get into trouble. Toxic isn't nearly as critical to this conversation as the concept of masculinity. And so, Glenn, when in response to your question, I only have to go as far as Terry Crews. Because to me, in all of the allegations that have been brought to light in the last several months, Terry's stands out as the greatest, not only anomaly, but also the greatest opportunity to address masculinity in general. Because you're talking about, dude, I'm telling you, for anybody to think that they could grab Terry Crews, 6 foot whatever, 280 pounds or whatever, by his genitals in the presence of his wife and other people, something seriously sick about that culture. And there's also something sick about a culture that doesn't immediately lead the person who's being humiliated, who's being harassed, to immediately verbalize their discomfort with this. There's a power dynamic that exists. And I think that power dynamic, Glenn and Dr. Vibe and listeners, I think it's woven in masculinity. I think one of the underlying premises of masculinity is a power base, an authority base. And I think when we identify great men, when we say he's a good man, it's those men, and Glenn, you know this better than anyone in this conversation, are men who've mastered the balance of power within the norms of our society that better people and prevent toxicity, either in themselves or in their relationships.
Right.
And I think that's how I view this concept of toxic masculinity. There's toxic femininity, right? There's toxic adolescence. But the one constant is the state that they're in. The behavior in that state is what makes it toxic. And I think that's the part where I think in this conversation, Glenn, you're the expert in this, will help guide us through pulling out what those toxic behaviors in that power dynamic of masculinity. Because here's the thing, in the archetypes that you know and operate and work with men in very well, this is that power dynamic of masculinity that we're talking about. It's not manhood, because masculinity and manhood are two different things.
Thank you.
This is about the power component of masculinity that becomes toxic and the way it's toxic.
I could not agree absolutely more than that kind of assessment, and you're absolutely right, Dr. T. Toxic masculinity will be hard to convince me it exists. Toxic men that have been possessed by a certain archetype, and it's got him, he doesn't have it, it has him. This adds to the toxicity of an already troubled person.
Agreed. Agreed.
Person. And I'm going to put this whole thing in the realm, really, of initiation, meaning if men were on the path with other men, and I'm just a lifelong advocate of this now, in the path with other men to help mature themselves and get what they want from this world without slipping into this being possessed. In this case, it's by an addictive lover kind of archetype that takes over, and this privilege that comes from having power that turns into either a tyrant or a sadist, which is another couple parts of a. So it's like a sadistic tyrant connected with a insatiable lover that takes advantage of the power. So I don't have to pathologize it, but it's this close to me. Yeah, and this comes from the immature part of the male that never gets developed. I'm not saying there would ever be a world where this would never be the case, but for the men I know, like the men of this panel have been doing their work, I'd be hard-pressed to believe that these things would exist in any of the lives of the men I know that do this work, right? Because they check themselves, and they know where that barrier is between their own personal dignity and somebody else's. They know the difference between abuse, where the abuse line is in their power. And I think that's the very thing that we're trying to teach here, at least from my perspective, is how do we have powerful men that aren't abusers, that don't abuse? The linkage between power and abuse in men is almost inseparable now. Yeah. It is achievable. And believe me, there are powerful men in this world that are not abusers, and it is possible. But it is done through initiation. It is bringing a man, deconstructing the boy, and growing the man. This is how it works. And I'm sorry, I don't believe there is any substitute. And this is done with other men. And the other side is, you know, the boys make excuses. The men take responsibility. Now that's different from blame. That means I play a part in what I do and what I don't do, and that has an effect. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. I'm going to take responsibility for my part. Only a man that's starting to mature and he's with other men can actually be clear and clean and honest enough with himself and take action and hold himself accountable. Hold himself accountable, because that's what he wants for himself and the world around him. That's missing.
Yeah.
That's missing.
Glenn, let me just, if I can just interrupt you, that part that is missing is part of that, not only a man being accountable to himself, but surrounding himself with men that will hold up and call, as you like to say, call them out when they're not being accountable.
That's right. That's right. And to turn yourself in when you know you're not being accountable. So there's one thing to get caught. Right? It's another thing to do the preemptive work because you know you have the propensity. I'm tempted. help me. I want to explode. I'm slipping into addiction. I'm slipping into porn. I'm slipping into alcohol. I'm chasing skirts. I don't want to go there. Help. What's going on with me? How come I'm not getting this right? Gone unchecked is what it is, and that's a sign, sounds old-fashioned, of immaturity.
So, Glenn, let me just take this another step further, and it's interesting. I'm thinking about this. When most people think about toxic masculinity, they're probably only thinking about sexual, but it can come in other areas, can it not?
Oh, absolutely. Well, just think of the world of abuse, okay? So the world of abuse of any kind of sadistic or manipulative behavior, and I think that's why I think these things could be attributed to women as well. They're not expressed maybe in the same way. So a man can pick up a sword to do a lot of damage. Right? I think women, on the other hand, can be just as devastating psychically and socially and manipulative and destructive and poisonous. I think it has the same venomous effect. It just does not demonstrated. The way men demonstrate this, and this has been explained also in IQ gaps and things too. Men on the bottom end possess, we'll just say there's a knucklehead bump at the bottom of the psyche of men, and then on the other hand, there's also a great genius bump on the IQ and on the emotional sides, where women come out a little more evenly. Men also have this bump on either end. So we are going to get more men on both ends of the scale. And I'm not here to make excuses for it. I'm here to say we are to take responsibility. And if anything we can do in this conversation here is try to teach men and women what responsibility really looks like. Not just blame, because that's after the fact, right? And that's where restitution has to be made, right? And that's where punishment comes in. Dr. T's right. Maybe that'll wake some people up. And maybe some people that don't belong thrown under the bus will get thrown under the bus. Yet, the big picture here is, how do we teach our young men and our young women accountability, taking responsibility, and not making excuses anymore?
I feel bad because I feel I'm cutting off a lot of things you want to share about. So I'm gonna zip my lip and let you, because I know there's probably things you want to share. So I'm gonna shut my mouth and let you continue. So my apologies.
No, that's kind of my stump speech for around this, and I just like to, if you men, kind of concur with that, or would please add to that. I think I'd like to move the conversation down the road to say, we know what's happening. What are we going to do?
So let me just focus a bit on this, Glenn, because when toxic masculinity happens, the thing that I have a concern about is there's probably at least one other man in the environment that sees it happening to this man. Mm-hmm. And they don't call him out on it. Because you take, all the gentlemen that have been alleged or have admitted, I'd love to ask them, did anyone else know about this? And then I'd love to ask that other person, why didn't you call him out on it?
You have an answer for that, Dr. Thompson?
Yeah, I have an idea. I don't know if I have a response. How about that? He'll be an answer if it's a good one. I think woven in all of this is our centuries. And I just think back to just my short lifetime. And even before I came into this world, the current administration's heralding of the early 50s as the most pristine time in America. Let's take a look at that particular era of manhood. It was very scripted in terms of roles. And men, and I mentioned that power dynamic of manhood. The television show Mad Men exemplifies everything in that era. The dominant male culture. The sexual harassment that we're now calling out. Watch Mad Men. In every single episode, those women are harassed, you can probably count 10 times. And it's a very popular show. Why are shows popular? Shows are popular because people can identify with what they're seeing. They keep coming back to what they can understand and rationalize. That show's been on for what, 9, 10 years? And it's a very popular show. It's represent, and I'm just talking about the last 60, 70 years. Go back centuries in the history of this world, and men and masculinity has always been weighed and measured as successful when it best exemplifies its power aspect of masculinity, even amongst men in our groups. Sure. And you asked the question, Dr. Vibe, why would not other men call them out? I think it comes back to that power principle. And in Glenn's work, I think when you, in all of the 4 archetypes that he works with men on, the power principle is woven in all of them. Some men use their power for good. I remember going and working with Glenn and having a conversation as he explains what my mission was. What are your goals? And he asked me, who do you serve? I don't know how many times he asked me that before I get, what the heck are you talking about? Because I thought my motive was very clear. But it was a man check. Before I go any further with you, to help, whatever is about, what's your motive?
Yep.
It set the framework for an understanding of what level of power are you seeking and how do you plan to exercise that power. And I think that's one of the aspects that's not clearly stated. The culture of the past drives the power principle. That power principle, unfortunately, I believe, this is just me, and I believe this based on the evidence of who's running our country today, how that particular person operates his particular power principle, and whom he brings along with them, and how they either support that power principle or carry the very same power principle practices themselves. So it doesn't surprise me, and I think, Dr. Vibe, you mentioned this early on, that some of this might even be the voices are coming out to go, look, if you won't do something about this, we're going to show you how prevalent this is down here, right? And maybe we'll get everyone to see how ridiculous it is to have someone running our office who has even worse allegations in front of them. That may be the end game if it's a political game. But if we let it be a political game, it will be a pendulum swing, people will get thrown under the bus, and that bus will move out of sight, right? So I think a lot of it comes down to culture. What is your power principle? And I don't think there's a cultural norm established that men should use their power, knowing it exists, knowing it's been bred for centuries, for good, and then defining what that should look like. We haven't done that.
Wow. Glenn, like you always say, Dr. T knows how to break it down, eh? That's phenomenal.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that I've been very blessed with is these two men, especially Glenn, has encouraged me to start doing work with men. And it's interesting, and I don't know, Glenn, if you can relate to this, and Dr. T also. I always notice, like I do work with fathers, young fathers who have challenges, let's put it that way, especially when it comes to separation from their children, for whatever reason. And it always seems a lot of times that I see the toxic come up when they start focusing on themselves and not focusing on their kids. And Dr. T, you said there about how Glenn says, what is your mission? What is your mission? And I always have to coach and mentor these gentlemen when they're flying off the handle. I say, look, it's all about the kids. So when they focus about doing the stuff for their kids, the toxic levels go down.
Yeah.
But when they're focusing on themselves, the me, they go all over the place. Just from my experience, I don't know if Glenn or Dr. T, you can relate to that, but I think that may be applicable to some of the individuals that are going through these challenges right now.
This is so multifaceted. You're right. This could be an entire series because the influences that Dr. T talked about, which is the social conditions and the climate conditions of within your company. Why don't you stand up? All kinds of power plays, and there's all kinds of who's like the king in the room, who's the master of the emotion in the room, and who's the abdicator. So who's going to give up their power so the other one can have their power. And then there's also a preservation piece that says, hey, I want nothing to do with it. Just I'm going to look the other way. I just don't want to get involved. So there's a cowardice in that. I mean, look, this could be pretty high stakes. I could not imagine any of you men in the room with seeing that happening and saying, hold on, time out. Time out. This is not okay. Young lady, would you mind stepping aside? I want to have a conversation with this man. Right? Then it'll be you and me. Okay, so what's this about? How can this happen here? Tell me how this is okay. Right? It doesn't happen. There's men that fear their jobs. I don't think the men in this room would have any qualms about doing that, period. Maybe you'd even get a thank you, truly, because you checked the man. So here's what I'll say. Masculinity is not, I should say, true mature masculine. It's not instinct. It's a tutelage. And I think there is the tutelage in its wonderful, empowering, and holistic forms, not just its sacred form or its perfect form or its destructive form, but in truly mentoring other men. It's a virtual void around the world. And so many of those rooms are filled with men that do not possess the kind of strength of character or moral judgment to handle that in a good way and demand within their environment and within my reach and my power, this will not happen. This will not happen. If I have any influence or tolerance at all, you're not taking anyone's side. You're holding on principle. You're holding on decency. You're talking about power differentials and taking advantage of people and misuse of power. We need more men to do that. And I'm just going to say it again to wrap it up and move on. Then that's my strongest conviction, is to say, women seem to become, by some kind of flowering virtue of their own. They understand about womanhood. It doesn't seem to need the kind of real tutelage that it needs to make a man, right? To make a mature masculine actually have possession. This has to be taught. I don't believe it comes upon. Rarely will it come on its own. And in the absence of that, this is what we get, gentlemen.
Yeah. Well, the question I have as I watch this is, and this goes back to the beginning, what's the end game? What's the end game? And for the individual, that's a personal thing. And I'm not questioning their motives, because from those that I've read, many of these people have held on to this embarrassment, shame, guilt, whatever is associated with this incident for years. And that's a relief for them. It's a release. It's an opportunity to move forward. That I understand. When I look at the rate of it and the response, and I think, Dr. Vibe, this goes back to what you said at the very beginning, many of these people are judged in the court of public opinion and social media immediately. So the opportunity for really due process, minus the Al Frankens and some of the others who said, you know what, I did this, and I own it, and I'm moving on. Okay, but there's a due process that's involved. And what if this pattern continues, what's preventing false allegations or false memories, for that matter, to change the outcome of someone's life without a due process? We have yet to see a challenged allegation go through any due process other than the court of public opinion and social media. And with such a quick response to this, it actually shifts power in a different way. And if you want to talk about toxic masculinity, what happens when that pendulum swings, that pendulum of power, which really isn't power, is power through fear inducement, anxiety? What will masculinity look like then? It will be toxic, but how will it manifest itself? That's the other part of this that concerns me, because if there isn't a due process to what we're seeing and hearing, we literally have such a pendulum swing. We're not talking about toxic masculinity. We'll be talking about masculinity, period. And at what level is it allowed to exist? At what level is it allowed to grow and develop to serve other people? to have and pursue its mission. That's my concern. As I look at the big picture of this masculinity issue, toxicity, God knows, each one of us who's sitting on this platform has an element of toxicity within our own masculinity. But when it manifests itself in the public in this manner, and the response is, I just don't know the word for it, but incomplete. It doesn't inform nor educate the public about anything. It's very reactionary. And if I'm a teenager or a young male and I'm hearing all of this, I know that this happens, but it doesn't inform me, other than don't do this, of what real masculinity is to move into manhood. That's that to me is the toxic in this discussion. One of the components of toxicity.
Well, I can go on then. I want to get Dr. Vibe on this, but I got something along those lines, and Dr. Thompson always gets me looking at another arena, and this is also the power of the victim. If you want to talk about a pendulum swing, it's the drama triangle, which actually, if you think about, please folks, look at the drama triangle. It's where one person in a scenario is a victim, and one is a persecutor, and one's a rescuer. And the truth of it is, the true power, it's going to sound odd, the true power is in the victim. And you'll see that now, where the victim can create an accusatory scenario that now, right or wrong, like someone in a public figure especially, or a head of a company, all they need now is to have that be tried in the press, and they're done. Right, so, not that I don't say they don't feel powerless because they've been victimized. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying, but the power of victimhood, because that victim connects to a heroic rescuer, the press, others, right, that kind of fight on their behalf, and that persecutor, who's a bad guy, is now like the root of all evil, and he's got to go.
Yep.
So, and this is, I think, maybe part of what Dr. T is seeing now, and I can agree with, which is those that have the biggest victim narrative are getting incredible power, and that's part of the pendulum. And I think when he speaks to due process, what I hear is that the lack of due process means you're guilty until proven innocent, and that's the power of the victim. Sounds odd. Give it some thought. Look at the drama triangle. Look it up in Wikipedia and understand how these things work. Somebody sympathetic goes in front of a judge. The person who was the persecutor, whether he is or not, he's going to get squished, because now you got the power of two entities, one to elicit the power of a. Now, in all fairness, when it's correct, it's wonderful. A victim can go to a higher power and go to a process that can absolutely take someone out of society that's a menace, and as it should be.
Right.
As it should be.
Right.
Right. But when all it needs now is an accusation, whether it's true or false is not the question. An accusation can ruin a life. We saw that with football players or with yoga, kids in college. Just young men, their lives being ruined by accusations. This is horrific. Or men, predatory or child abuse and divorces and things. This is horrific. You see men, they're killing themselves because they can't extricate themselves from the accusations, and it's just devastating. So this is where the pendulum goes too far, and I'm afraid, like Dr. Thompson says, I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Well, it's not only, Glenn, it's not only not slowing down. I don't know if you all are familiar, any of your listeners, about the young man, I believe he's in Tennessee, who shared on social media, his mother did, him crying about being bullied. I think the last name is Keaton.
Yes, yeah, it was trending like crazy for a few days on social media.
And celebrities from all areas of our culture came out in support of this kid. You know, if you saw the video and didn't delve any further, of course it would. Heck, I post these things on my Facebook page when I find them. After I vet them, heck, sometimes I even contact the parents myself to get the story. But immediately, the evidence began to show, the principal said, well, the incident she's talking about was weeks ago. And we already took care of that. What are they talking about? And there are also some allegations that he might have been the instigator. And then later, the GoFundMe page that was set up to go buy Christmas gifts. And then her ex-husband and her son and him with the Confederate flag, and he's in prison, a known racist. And then today, or yesterday, MMA fighter offers to fly them out to meet other MMA fighters. And the mother says, make sure you have everybody go to my GoFundMe page so I can, he goes, what do you need that for? He goes, it's Christmas, I'm a single mom. And then he goes, whoa, I'm not doing that. And then she says, well, you know, all of us white people, we got to stick together. What are you talking about? He goes, what? So I share that with you because I think it's at the essence of, we're talking about toxic masculinity, but we're not talking about it unless we have these series of incidents over the last 6-7 months.
Yes.
And then we start seeing how that particular response is being used. It now begins to open up, a new culture? Maybe short-lived, but now I can make an allegation, create a video, go on social media, and literally in a day have $70,000 in the GoFundMe account. We have to question motives, right? So, and this goes back to Glenn's question that he asked of me several years ago, September 9th, 2014. Whom do you serve? Whom do you serve and what's your mission? And until we start doing this and evaluating our relationships, our cultures, and our institutions, this Hollywood thing, guys, y'all both know people have been talking about that culture for decades, ever since I've been alive. The casting couch, that goes back how far? That's not new. This is what I meant about that Mad Men mentality. That power structure and this casting couch is not new, and it transcends gender. Men have been caught in this casting couch. We've got Corey Feldman, who for over a decade, has been talking about the pedophile ring in Hollywood, right? That's out there. We have some of these young stars now coming out. This power principle is the misplaced component of masculinity that does, in my view, the most damage. It's the one, and Glenn, I'd love for you to talk about, you can go far more in depth than I can, but it's my view that this power component of masculinity has been around so long, it has been normed. It has been so normed. And as our society, it's been so normed, we have a president who's norming it again. He's renorming it.
I don't want to go there.
I know you don't, but it.
Oh well, I don't live in your country, and I don't want to go there.
That's okay. I don't mind speaking on it, and no one has to agree with me.
I hear you.
But it's the elephant in the room.
Yes.
That no one wants to talk about, and it is the umbrella under which we are now operating. And it's staring us in the face, and I think what we're seeing is like in a classroom. If I have a favorite student, and he gets to chew gum all the time, and I never say anything, you know what's going to happen? I've seen this happen before. Other kids will start chewing gum, and then other kids will start calling him out, and at some point, I'm going to have to act. And I end up punishing everybody but my favorite student. Did anything really change? What the students would have done better would have been approach me about a process about dealing with my favorite kid who's chewing gum. And that's what's missing in this reactionary. It's not reactionary in the sense that it is real for these people involved. I didn't say it was true. I said it's real. And when you look at the reactions and responses by those who are accused, to some credit, if you will, for lack of a better term, they're owning up to it, and they're facing their consequences, as should be. But again, I'm just concerned that in our masculinity, many men, and I've had conversations, I don't know if you've had, some have said to me, well, they're coming after us. What do you mean? What do you mean us? I'm not. I'm
Not one of you.
And they're talking about men, and I'm like, well, if you view manhood or that is a component of your manhood, there's a problem. You're not entitled to that. And again, it's another way to get at that power component, that dysfunctional power component of manhood. And Glenn, if you have anything you want to add to that, I love to learn. I always do about that power dynamic. And I know you in your world, you've mentioned to me, and you and I've had many conversations about shadow aspects of manhood. Would I be correct in assuming that this power principle that I'm talking about and the way it's being exercised is a shadow component of masculinity?
Oh, absolutely, Dr. T. In fact, the power, let's say the power can manifest in, say, any of 12 ways within 4 master powers that a man has possession of. So, in other words, are you absent of the power? So let's talk about what makes me assertive in the world. You can call that my warrior aspect, my ability to defend, right, and to go after and have the sustainability and focus. If I don't have enough of that, now that power is absent, or I've abdicated it. I've given it up. And so that's going to have an impact, right? And that might be learned, that might be because I'm shy, I feel inadequate, or I've been scared of it, or I don't know what it means, but if that's absent, it is all, and a power, the way you say it, Dr. Thompson, is absolutely correct. It's not only is it there, in what form, or is it absent? If it's there, in what form, or is it absent? You talked about a man, why didn't you stand up? Who else was in the room? In that case, that man's who was witnessing these transgressions either abdicated his power, gave it up intentionally, or was unable to act. So he's given away his power at that point. He's not exercising his power. It might be choice for survival, right? But still, we might look at that as an act of cowardice. Where were you? You saw this and you did nothing? That's a harsh judgment, yet proper use of power. So it's got 2 great aspects. Say, in general, a destructive or toxic aspect that can turn into toxicity. My warrior can be a savage. It can be a sadist. Right? On the other side of the warrior, that could be some could describe it as a masochist. It takes pain because it doesn't have enough will of its own to stand up in defense. Or maybe it's been in so long that it's internalized oppression and it's actually attracting it.
Yep.
Very odd. It might feel very odd, but it's true. But the proper use of assertiveness in our male world, the way I like to see it, is what is proper assertion of power and energy in this area of saying, we're going to get something done. And like Dr. Thompson likes to say, and we ain't going to kill nobody on the way.
Yeah.
You don't have to die for me to get what I want in this world.
True.
In fact, if I can help you, if we could be allies, we both might want what we get in this world. And when that part of me is actually in service, this is the part about mission, when it's in service to something greater than you. Dr. Thompson said this too. There's nothing like a man that says, I'm working for my family. I'm working for my child. And I'm in service to something greater than myself. Now that can be your maker, your family, right? Some great cause that you believe in to help the world. When it's attached to something greater than you, now it's in service to it. It's not self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a thing that develops in the mature man who understands that that's a greater source of power and concentration and used properly. I believe it gets recognized and honored. There's a warrior for good. There's a warrior. That's a man I want to stand next to, doing anything.
Right.
And that's
Glenn, you know what made me think as you were talking? I started thinking about some of the women in the scenarios that I read about. They didn't even have anybody they could run to within the organizations. They couldn't run out of the room and go to the next office and go, hey, John, I got to tell you, right? They didn't even have that. The very thing you're talking about did not exist. As a matter of fact, the ones that I did hear where they went to another male in the organization, you know what they said? You know, that's just so-and-so. sorry that happened to you.
Hmm.
What? That's it? See, it's not just this is that culture component of the power principle. And I think, Glenn, what made me think of that when you said there are men who are absent of power. They don't, their shadow is, I don't know how to exercise my authority, my assertiveness, the power of my masculinity to serve others. Who are you serving? The men who ignored it did not serve the people that came to them. They served themselves.
Yeah. They don't know how to defend the boundaries. There's no honor in that. That's what part of our masculine form is for. Defend the boundaries for ourselves and others. Right. Stand in the way of these things happening. Right. It's not about killer instinct. It's about defending the boundaries.
It's a good quote.
Yeah.
That's very good.
That's the constant that I see in this toxic component of our masculinity. I talked about the due process that I think is missing in this cycle that we're seeing. But there's also a lack of due process within these institutions and organizations, and I dare say probably cultures. Oh. There's not a due process in our own masculinity of checking another man on their power.
Right.
And when I've seen it, it is literally war.
Gentlemen, I want to interrupt you because I have some good stuff for you.
Sure.
We've got 3 questions. And what's very exciting, not only the questions, it's from someone who follows me. It's hashtag NOJU, Nuju. He is based in South Africa. And he is watching this live at 5:29 a.m. in the morning.
Does he drink coffee on them?
So he has 3 questions. I know time is limited, but I'm going to try at least to get 1 or 2 of them in. His first question is, why is it difficult for us men to hold each other accountable and call each other out and cut those men who perpetuate vile masculinities? Good question.
Wow. You want to take that one first?
Why? And I think we just touched on it slightly, and that is there's a cowardice aspect, right? An abdication, it's called, where you say, I am powerless in this situation. And some of it might be legitimate, right? You don't want to take the risk, and that's what it is, being risk adverse. And that saddens me. How do you negotiate your morality and your values? That is always up to the individual, and what are you going to live with yourself with? But in the main, I could not call myself, I'd say, a mature, responsible man, and abdicate in situations like that. It would be very hard for me to reconcile that with myself and the men that I know. I'd have to do some pretty serious work unless it was the life-threatening for myself and it was, preservation opportunity, to not call that out. And why? For me, it's a courage piece. It's an old-fashioned word, but it's a courage piece. Do I want to take that risk or not? And like Dr. Thompson says, do I feel capable, right, of handling this? There is an uncomfortableness, an emotional thing that has to reach a certain amount of emotional maturity before he knows the words and says, hold on, time out. Time out. Young lady, would you stand over there a minute or sit down in the other room for a minute? I want to have a conversation with this man. Right? Yeah. And I want you to say, what is going on?
Yeah. Okay. I agree with you.
What did I just see here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, go ahead, gentlemen.
Well, let's just say that's a tutelage because it's not instinct. I think part of it, my baseline is it's not instinct, it's a tutelage. And if a man doesn't exercise those kind of muscles, he can't give what he doesn't have.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that, I agree 100%. And I knows you. JU knows you. I would add that most men, I agree with everything Glenn just said, but I'd also add one thing we don't do is think with the end in mind. Before you speak and act, we don't think, we react. And we never say, and I'm going to actually couch this in a strategy. think about what you want to have happen before you step into the conversation, before you confront. I know what I want the end to be. You may not know what the words are. You may not know what the tone is, but if you know what you want the end result to be, you will grow in the other two. And it always starts with the end in mind. And I think that's where the courage that Glenn mentioned is absent. It's one of the pieces that's mentioned, because we always go into scenarios, well, if I say something, he's going to get mad, he's going to hit me, we're going to be in a fight, or I'm going to lose a friend, or screw all that. What do you want to have happen? Because all of that can be mitigated if you know what you want to have happen. And I think the other part of this, the only piece that I would add, and this is something my dad said to my brothers and I, always be willing to stand alone.
Wow.
You see, most men are not always willing to stand alone against a group. And you better have a pair if you're going to call yourself a man. That's something I learned when I was like 12 years old. And my dad, when I tell you, that got reinforced to me more, as much as anything else in my lifetime. That's something I see an absence of, and why men abdicate their masculinity to other men, even in the face of unfairness or injustice. That's one of the common threads I see. But if you can start with the end in mind, you're always better able to have that critical conversation.
Brilliant. That's brilliant.
It is.
That is brilliant. That is brilliant. I don't know how much time you have, Glenn. He has two more questions that you want to. I don't know what your timelines are like. It's up to you.
Let's do these two. We'll do a wrap, because this man was up in the middle of the night on the other side of the world. He gets my time.
Much appreciated. One other thing, I just also want to say hello to Dr. Tachi. Tachi is also checking us out. So thank you.
Hey, Dr. Tachi.
Yes. So next question, and this both the next two questions one involves your current president, and the other one involves the past president. So the first question Nadru has is, do you ever consider that your current president is useful in that it makes Americans confront the reality that they've always felt about how toxic Americans are as a country in relation to other countries? He thinks that the current president represents the apex of toxic, vile masculinities, which is the embodiment of a current American foreign policy. So I think that's more of a political commentary than a man commentary. So I don't know if you guys want to go. He's asking yes or no. I don't know what your takes are in regards to that commentary.
Let me start, and I want to say this. Glenn Barker works for an organization that's global. So I'm going to answer for me, and I want to give this answer for both of us. And I say that not really for both of us. I do not speak for Glenn. I'm going to say this. Yes, I think he represents everything that we're discussing, every example of toxic masculinity, particularly in that power principle. But I will also say that's not a bad thing. And I'm not so sure we would even be having this conversation. I'm not so sure those stories of those people who come forward would have ever come forward if the example weren't so brazenly displayed in front of them. Brought out every week, daily, to the point that it brought back those memories. It brought back that anger, those suppressed feelings. I would not be surprised if 10 years down the road, when we examine this period of time, that this president and his position on women verbally is not going to be seen as the catalyst for every single thing we're talking about. This president may give us men in this country, and those like yourself get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to discuss this, to actually examine ourselves, to strengthen ourselves as men. Is it bad that it's that way? Yes. But is it good that he gives us an opportunity to grow? And is it good for those past victims to now feel empowered enough, angry enough, disgusted enough to step forward, I think yes. I think he has been good for those people in that way, and hopefully us down the road.
Glenn, do you want to add anything to that?
It'll just be another version of that, but I'll put it in another set of kind of words. I'm agreeing with Dr. Thompson. This will be the in time. This will be the best social studies era since maybe the Vietnam War. What Trump has done, he's brought politics into every single living room and every single conversation. It dominates almost all table conversations everywhere, world politics and politics. For that, we will not, I think that's been absolutely wonderful as a byproduct, not intended by him. And so what I'll put it, for the man who asked about on a global stage, basically he's asking, are you ready to own your original ugly American? The brazen man that walks around the world telling them what they could do and America knows best, and that's what it is. It's the old story of the ugly American. And is he back, and are we ashamed of him, is kind of what I heard. And my short answer is, in his behaviors, yes. And maybe we don't get what we want, but we get what we deserve. And for some reason, this man is in place. And here's what, it's been a hard sell for me, because it's not in defense, but what I'll say is, out of chaos, new opportunity arises. And wherever this man goes, there's chaos. And I think in some measure, like Dr. T maybe, in other words, he shakes all the trees, and the rotten fruit comes down, and there's enough of it to go around. And what's going to happen is the sun's going to come out, we're all going to be in the middle of the parking lot naked, right? And the best disinfectant is sunshine.
I'm going to be hiding behind a hubcap. I don't know about I'm the biggest hubcap I can find.
I don't see you coming down from the tree.
Okay. let me add his last question here. Okay. He says the Obama movement on the surface was a great gig, yet he just had swag, a good orator. Well, okay, I'm going to eliminate that. He has a concern about Barack Obama fist-bumping kids and hosting hip-hop artists in the White House. Isn't that part of toxic masculinity?
Some might disagree because they felt that in many ways he was very much an abdicator, that he was a puppet for the women's movement and the women in his lives, and he was kind of a prop for them. And yet, I also believe there was a part of him that really saw the world in this utopian sense, and I don't see him as a phony. I don't. He had great diplomatic skills. He had great persuasion and great potential. He just didn't change the world. I don't think like any president can. It doesn't yield as much power as you think. And he just represented another kind of male with and I just can't believe the guy didn't try to do the best he could. I can't help but think in his bones that he really believed he didn't want to.
All right.
Was an Arthurian. I just think the guy really tried to do what he thought was best. And there's some things that are going to bite him in the butt, and some things that probably he'd rethink if he could. I just feel the man tried to do the best he could.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. He was probably in it's hard to compare his presidency with any other because he had the most unique challenge of any past president. And I think there were so many hopes, unrealistic hopes, that he would be that bastion of change and that kumbaya presidency that put 400, 500 years of pain and whatever colonialism to bed. And that is way too much to put on one man's shoulder. So I think he is still being evaluated through that lens in every community throughout the world. And he will never get a fair shake over the next 20 years.
All right.
But because I think his full presidency, because we're living in that moment, it's hard to set aside those emotions and our own expectations about his presidency to really give him a fair shake. Regarding having rappers in the White House, Nobody complained when the Dixie Chicks were in the White House. Nobody complained when Ted Nugent was in the White House and Kid Rock was in the White House. Every single president in America has their own affinity for music, and every single president brings their, not America's, brings their favorite, their culture, because they now, for the first time, may have access to request that, and they always exercise it. So I don't find that as an anomaly. He did what every previous president did, and like I said, we've already had Ted Nugent and Kid Rock in the White House, so I think that kind of speaks to that statement of individuality.
He does make a final comment, Nugent, saying he is of the view that the leaders we elect represent who we are. We can't talk about toxic masculinity and patriarchy as an individual process, but as a systemic way of being with those in power, reflecting who we are as a people, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well stated. Well stated.
All right. Well,
I think it's...
Go ahead, Glenn.
There's also a lot of projection that goes along with that. We look at our leaders to be that, and sorry, I do not.
There you go. Excellent. Well, isn't it always the way? People are jumping on this conversation as we're winding it down, but hey, if you missed out, you got to catch the replay. But gentlemen, any final comments? Where do you see toxic masculinity in 2018? Oh, don't laugh like that.
Oh, what? Are you kidding me? I do not see this thing slowing down. All I see is more and more of these cases coming up. I'm not laughing at the victims. I'm just... We started this show with you, unveiling something that happened today, right? I was on that person's show a couple of years ago.
I mentioned that. I mentioned that when I was doing the Facebook Live. I said, ironically, I'm going, oh my goodness.
Yeah, and he and I, I'm not making a judgment statement. I don't even know the particulars. But for the first time in all of this public stuff, I went, that's the closest it's come to home, right? So I'm just saying to myself, where do I see next year? We're coming up on the holidays. Everybody's going to be worried about something else. 2018, I think, is going to be more unveilings. I think we are going to be experiencing arguably more revelations, not just on this issue, but if we're talking about masculinity. I think we're just beginning to see beginning of a new cycle.
Glenn?
And I'm hopeful. Pendulums will swing at different rates for different reasons, and this will be the flavor of the month next year. And sadly, the people that are impacted negatively, maybe lives will be ruined, and maybe some of those that have been getting away with this stuff, their lives will be ruined, and rightfully so. And again, for the mess it is, for the chaos it brings, I think we're in a time of just that. We're in a time of social cleansing. I think it's good that the trees are being shaken, that everyone's being questioned, and what that's going to be is scary and intimidating and uncertain. If you want to know what fear is, you know what it is? It's uncertainty.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to get people scared, make them uncertain. And that's kind of what this kind of top-down thing that has come up over and over and over again, I think it's about uncertainty.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a very good point.
What's going to happen? What's going to happen next? Right. And we're in a whole new era of what's happening next and looking for the next tidal wave to hit. And this is, so to me, we're ready to close. Men, come to this work. Come to help. We're close to say how to get a hold of us all in here. Because come to this work. We need to be centered within ourselves and not be. We're not exempt from what happens to the world, but how we react is where we have a chance. Not exempt from feeling whatever the man feels or what's impacting my world. The only chance I have to control anything is how I react to it. Period. I have no control over anything except how I react to it.
Yep.
And I'll maybe get a chance at that if I work at it hard enough.
Good stuff. Glenn, how can people get in contact with you?
I work with a group called the Mankind Project, and you can call me at 312-243-6743. That's 312-243-6743. MKPChicago.org is on the internet. MKP Chicago is on Twitter. Glenn Barker, you can find him on Facebook. And thank you for joining us.
Dr. T?
Yes, you can reach me by email at drT@drteducates.com, and also you can find me on Twitter at Dr. T Educates and Facebook at Dr. T Educates.
Myself, the drvibeshow.com. That's the website. If you want to watch replays of my YouTube conversations, you're at the place. If you want to listen to replays of my audio epic conversations, you can go to the website. You can go to Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music Store. You can also hear selected audio replays at thegoodmenproject.com. Yes, I've got it down pat. and also
that was good.
And I'm not finished yet. WJMSradio.com too for selected audio replays. You can also know that I'm a certified empowerment coach, president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching Communications. If you'd like a complimentary 30-minute session, reach out to me, Twitter at drvibeshow, email address dr@vibeshow.com. I'm also a brand ambassador for Cuisine Noir magazine, the only online magazine dedicated to African Americans in food, wine, and travel. And also I provide a service called Getting Media Coverage, where I help businesses and entrepreneurs get promoted in the media so they can enhance their business and elevate their business. So I'd also like to thank Dr. Tachi, also Think TV, also Enju in South Africa, where it's 5:49 in the morning. Thank you for the great questions. I know that Glenn and Dr. T appreciate it. I know others watch it, whether you watch it live or on the replay. It's appreciated, not taken for granted. 3 last things. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Also, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. And finally, God bless, peace be well, keep the faith. Have a great rest of 2017, and make sure 2018 you stamp out toxic masculinity, whether you're a man or a woman. God bless, peace be well, and keep the faith. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.